definitely glad that you are here. This is our second time out in this area. So my name is David Garlock. I'm the Pennsylvania State Organizer for Straight Ahead. Straight Ahead is a C4 organization that is off of the Abolitionist Law Center. And so our main focus is to work on two different bills. One bill would provide parole eligibility for lifers. In the Senate is SB 135. And to provide parole eligibility for elders and medical parole, which is SB 835, which is also in the Senate. And I'll talk some more later about the other bills that are being discussed right now in the House. So we are glad that you're here. We have a combination of family members, friends, of people that are incarcerated, and the different people that are going to speak today. So right now, I wanted to introduce Raff Donaldson. He is a professor at Dickinson Law.
All right, well, thank you for inviting me to come and chat with you guys all today. So as David said, I'm Raff Donaldson. I am a professor at Dickinson Law School. I'm also a commissioner on the Carlisle Borough Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I sit on the board of directors of Mid-Penn Legal Services, which is a nonprofit law firm that offers civil legal services to low-income people across central PA. But I'm not here really to talk about myself, but I'll begin with telling the story of a client I had when I was still just a student in law school working in a legal clinic. I can tell you his story because there's been some media coverage about him. So his story begins in 1991. His name was Lindsey Criddle. Lindsey was a poor black kid from Chicago. He lived in a broken home with his mother, who had a drug problem and a short temper. She also had a long list of boyfriends who had a whole host of problems of their own. And some of those problems landed those guys in federal prison. So Lindsey wasn't really much for school. He actually spent a lot of his time when he's 16 and 17 involved in kind of minor property crimes, shoplifting, and the occasional robbery. On one occasion, Lindsey got arrested for shoplifting. And Lindsey thought that he might talk his way out of this conviction, or at least talk his way out of getting a charge. So when he's arrested and talking to the police about the shoplifting, he decides to tell them about something that had happened just a couple of weeks prior. He was the getaway driver for a robbery gone wrong. He was sitting in the car waiting for this older person he was working with, an adult, who was supposed to just rob a small business and come out. But instead, that guy shot two other people and killed them. Lindsey didn't know that anyone was going to be killed beforehand, didn't intend for that to happen, but it did happen. And he thought if he shared this with the police, they might be lenient about the shoplifting. Now, Lindsey didn't recognize that shoplifting is a really minor offense. He probably, since it was his first time being arrested, probably wouldn't have served a day in jail at all. But instead, he had admitted to a very, very serious crime. Because if you are out committing a felony, like robbery, and two people are killed as a result of that, that's a felony murder. And under Illinois law, if you commit two felony murders, you have a mandatory life sentence. So to escape a couple of days, perhaps, waiting in jail, he got a mandatory life sentence. That was in 1991. So I took on his case in 2014. Now, what were we doing in 2014? Well, in the intervening decades, the Supreme Court said that juveniles can't get mandatory life sentences. They can get life sentences, but not mandatory life sentences. Instead, the court has to look at whether this juvenile who did this is really among the worst of the worst, whether they really are incapable of reform. So everyone who had gotten a mandatory sentence would have to be resentenced. And so this is when I began working on his case, looking for information about the original circumstances of the crime, looking for mitigating information to present to a judge and hope to get something less than life without parole, or LWOP. I'm very proud to say that Lindsey was released in June of 2016 after serving 25 years. Now, to me, Lindsey's case highlights three problems that we have in our criminal justice system. One is a kind of background inequality. People like Lindsey more often than others end up turning to a life of crime. They have these bad situations like he did, growing up with disadvantage, maybe problems at home. The second thing is a kind of knowledge problem. Obviously, if Lindsey knew how to exercise his constitutional rights properly, he would have sought an attorney, and any attorney worth his salt would have learned and would have told him, this is not a thing that you should confess to police to get out of shoplifting. The third thing, and this is the thing that we're mostly talking about here today, is a kind of over-punishment problem. Now, mind you, as I said, Lindsey had some conditions in his life that predisposed him towards committing crime, and Lindsey obviously didn't know how to exercise his constitutional rights properly, and that's what landed him in jail. But we have to remember he did do something wrong, did something seriously wrong, in that robbing people, especially small business owners trying to get by, isn't a great thing. Even if most small business owners have a kind of insurance, and so they're going to be taken care of if money is taken, having somebody pull a gun on you is never a pleasant thing. It's terrifying, in fact. I've had it happen to me. So, what he did was wrong, but did he deserve the possibility of life in prison? His over-punishment. Now, the courts jumped in and rescued my client, gave him his life back, which is amazing, but the courts aren't going to be available to rescue everyone. So we have to address those three problems. On the background and equality thing, there's a lot to say here, and this isn't the time to talk about all those things. But one thing that jumps out to me is that 70% of the people convicted of felony murders in Pennsylvania are black. 12% of our population is black. Now, this kind of shocking disparity, I think, is explained by the fact that many black youths are in a similar situation to Lindsey. That they're poor, they come from abusive households, they have few options for getting ahead. And so they might turn to theft or might turn to the drug trade, and then something goes wrong. We need to make sure that we create a world where there are less Lindsey Criddles. Second thing is the knowledge problem that I mentioned. We have to work on that too. When I lived in Chicago, when I was in law school, I did know your rights trainings to tell youth in schools. Sometimes we went to churches, we went to other places where youth were, and we tried to make sure that youth did know about their constitutional rights in their interactions, particularly with police officers. I think that more things like that have to happen. I don't know if there are organizations that are doing that here in Carlisle, but we need to have them. But the last thing is that over-punishment problem that we have to fix. And this is where an organization like Straight Ahead really does come in. The scope of the problem is that over 5,400 people are serving LWOP, or life without parole sentences, here in PA. And about 500 of those people have been serving those sentences since they were juveniles. That's the problem. And what do we need to do about it? Well, one of the things that we should do is pressure our governor to grant clemency to our elders behind bars. I pulled up some research by a research team led by a Pittsburgh professor. He's at Carnegie Mellon University. And he tells us, like so many others have told, that people largely age out of crime. His research shows us that people who do property crimes, like burglary, car theft, they tend to stop doing that in their 20s. Whereas people who commit more violent crimes, they tend to stop doing those things in their early 30s, and that those involved in kind of drug crimes tend to continue a little bit longer, still into their 30s, but people typically don't commit a lot of crimes in their 40s and 50s and 60s and beyond, which tells us that we don't need to lock up people for decades and decades and decades, at least not for our safety. In addition to kind of calling on the governor to do things, as David mentioned, we can call on our legislature as well to pass reasonable legislation to eliminate those sentences that have no parole at all. Pennsylvania is just one of 6 states that has no option of life with parole. One of just 6 states. That's a terrible way for our state to stand out. If we should win the fight against LWOP, or life without parole, we have to make sure that it's a full victory. We have to ensure that there's opportunities for people to have an effective and supportive reentry. That means, there's things like the Cumberland County Adult Reentry Program. We as citizens should volunteer for that. If we're small business owners, we need to hire people who have criminal records. If we're landlords, we need to rent to people who have criminal records. And there's probably many, many other things that we have to do that I haven't thought of yet. And that's why it's important for us to partner, to put our heads together. So I want to close then in inviting you, if you can and you have ideas, to reach out to me, particularly in my role on the Carlisle Borough Truth and Reconciliation Commission. If you have suggestions about how we can together speak truth to power and bring greater reconciliation to our communities, please reach out. Thank you.
So right now, we're just going to go home now and just think about what he said. Thank you, Professor Raff. That was great. We definitely appreciate that. Now we're going to have Kurt Danesh come up and just talk about his story and the work that he's doing here in Cumberland County.
My name's Kurt Danesh. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm going to do my best. I operate a reentry organization here in Carlisle. We try to pair successful reentrants with newly released reentrants to kind of give the emotional support that's missing in our system, on the tail end of our system. But before I did that, I spent 24 years in the Department of Corrections. I've been out for about 1.5 years now. When I went in, I was 18. They sentenced me to 22.5 years. I wasn't even alive that long. I thought my life was over. I was initially facing the death penalty. And then when you're facing trial, you don't know what's going on. Like the gentleman talked about knowing our rights. I was a bit character in the courtroom. After the hearing, I would ask my lawyer, what happened? And that's how most defendants are in court. So somewhere behind the scenes, they ended up offering me a plea bargain for 22.5 to 60. I committed a serious crime. I committed a homicide. Arguably, by the facts, it was a first-degree homicide. But they saw fit to give me a 3rd degree, which meant I had an opportunity for parole after 22.5 years. Looking back, my skin color, the fact that I was in a rural county, played a large role in my sentence, in my conviction, because if I was in Philadelphia and I was an 18-year-old black man, I would have been sentenced to life or death. There's no doubt about that. So when I went in the system, I was terrified. I felt my life was over. I didn't care if I lived or died. I was the dangerous inmate in jail because of the fear level. And it was lifers that pulled me aside. It was lifers that invested in me, that persuaded me that my life is not over, that no matter how far away that light seems, you have light at the end of the tunnel. These men, Sean Davis, Louis Rivera, Peter Spann, Warren Peterson, they took me under their wing. They got me in school. They had me invest in my future. I left prison with an associate's degree, a diploma of paralegal. I went into jail with 9th grade dropout. So these are achievements. I started programs inside. We ran victim awareness programs run by the inmates themselves. And men would come to these programs and they would openly weep about the remorse they have for their crimes. The same programs are run by staff, not so much participation. But when you had the lifers running these programs, people knew they were in good company. They were with men that would understand. because we have a vision of what a lifer is. When we envision sentencing someone to life, we picture, let's be honest, a thug. Someone that's so dangerous from society that we have to lock them up and distance them from ourselves. Those are not the men behind bars serving life. It might have been who they were in the moment that that happened. If you want to take one smidget of your life, your worst moment, and say that's who you are. But then we're all guilty of being terrible people, because we've all been terrible people at one time. So I just want to share some numbers, first of all, is that in 2019 alone, we sentenced 98, almost 100 citizens to life without parole in Pennsylvania. Threw them away in a cage and said, you're never coming home. We would rather spend $60,000 a year to incarcerate you every single year, totaling probably $2 million each one, than try to rehabilitate you or to believe that in 10, 15, 20 years you're not going to be the same person. No other agency in the Commonwealth can have a 75% failure rate and still get billions of dollars every year, except the Department of Corrections, and that's what's going on. But of those 100 that were sentenced, 83 of them are under the age of 25. 5 of them are under the age of 20. These are teenagers that we threw into a cell and said, you are incorrigible. There's no hope for change in you. We are just throwing you away. Like I said, we imagine these young, dangerous predators in jail. Currently, right now today, we have 5,447 individuals serving life in prison. Of those, 2,601, almost half, are over the age of 50. Almost a quarter, 1,329, are over the age of 60, still being held in maximum security prisons. We are paying $60,000 a year just in incarceration. That doesn't count medical bills. These men do not, and women, do not pose a threat to society at this point, not at 60 years old. And we're not saying to release all of them. I'm not saying that. Give them an opportunity for parole. Let the parole board look individually at each one of these individuals and say, are they a threat today? Have they done good in prison? Have they changed? Are they remorseful? Do their victims still want them there? Because that doesn't matter in Pennsylvania either. There are victims that are going there saying, I want these offenders out. I forgive them. And the system says there's no room for forgiveness in our system. This is a vengeful system, and that's where we live today. And your taxpayer money is being spent on this system. Some people say, well, you committed a homicide, you should just do life, period. We're not saying people don't deserve punishments. I committed a homicide. I deserve to spend every day of 24 years in prison for that crime. I'm not making excuses for my crime. But if you look at the numbers, again, almost half have served 25 years already. Almost 1,500 have served 30 years. Almost 1,000 have served 35 years. And almost 500 have served 40 or more years in our prison system. And they're still sitting in there. And there's a picture on each one of your table. He's the longest serving lifer in Pennsylvania. He was released recently. He served 68 years. From the age of 15, we kept him in jail until the Supreme Court came in Pennsylvania and said, you have to release this man. Pennsylvania Department of Corrections was not willing to release him. Unfortunately, he served so much time, he didn't even want to be released. The courts forced him out of prison. He's doing well now, though. I mean, it took a push, but he's doing well. And as the man said, 500 juvenile lifers were released in Pennsylvania into society. None returned to prison. They're all on parole. One slight, you don't have to commit a new crime. If you're late for your curfew, if you don't pay your fines, you go back to prison. None of these people went back to prison. If the juveniles can come out safely, why can't the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds? Because that was the cutoff date. If one co-defendant was 17 when he went in, he's home now. If the other co-defendant was 18 and 2 months, he's done. He's spending the rest of his life in prison. I share my story of what I'm doing out here. I'm on the Cumberland County Reentry Coalition. I'm on the executive board. I sit with the head of probation, judges in the same room with me. I did the same thing these lifers did. They could be out here succeeding just like me, and they do better. These men are greater than me. They deserve to be out here more than me because they created who I am today. Without them, I would still be that lost person in prison, getting in trouble, spending time in the hole. And if you don't have sympathy for these men, which is okay, not everybody can, you're wasting taxpayer money. They are not posing a threat. So I don't care what side of the political spectrum you were on, everybody should support prison reform, should support giving second chances to those that deserve it. Because if you grant parole opportunity to these men and women, they're not guaranteed to come home. If they go in front of that parole board and they've done nothing, they will tell them to stay in jail. But the ones that changed have an opportunity to come home. Right now, there's no hope to change, but they're still changing. They're still doing something positive in prison. Nobody's making them do it. When I went into prison, I thought the lifers were going to be the dangerous population. I was scared of them. I said, these guys have nothing to lose. They were the nicest, most compassionate population in the prison, with few exceptions. I'm not going to paint a brush with everybody. And they have no reason to change except sincerity. They feel remorse for what they did. They want to invest in the younger generation. When they see a young guy come in, even with a 2-year sentence, they grab him, pull him under their wing, and tell him, you're going to be me if you don't change. And so many people have been skirted away from the cycle of crime and recidivism by lifers. They have a huge impact on decreasing our recidivism rate in our system, and they don't get the credit for it. And if you went into prison and asked the correctional officers which are the best behaved inmates, the ones that they would, if they had to release somebody and live next door, they would point to the lifers every time. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought, but at the end of the day, I just want to say that people like me and the third-degree murderers that are released every year, which are a greater number of white people than the lifers by far, because white people get plea bargains and they get the chance to come home. The fact that they're doing well, they're showing that the lifers can do well, because it's the same crime. So with that, what you guys can do is let your lawmakers know that you support second chances. Just that, because we're seeing a shift. Politicians, Republican, Democrat, are leaning toward this, and I've had private conversations where they support it, but they're not willing to do it publicly until they know you guys are willing to too. So if you let them know that it's a safe climate to support change, to support second chances for people, they're going to be more inclined to vote that way. So reach out, tell them you believe in second chances, that you believe in prison reform, commutation reform, and vote the politicians in that support it. If they don't, tell them you're not willing to give them your vote. That, I thank you, and I thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for being so open and willing to share your story, you know, and he's a perfect example of the people that we're here fighting for. Society will look at somebody who's committed a murder as a monster. But right now, you're seeing the face of somebody who committed murder. Does Kurt look like a monster? He looks like a normal human being, right? And that's what we have to do, you know. We have to humanize this population, you know. They are not just a number. They are human beings, you know, as far as like this guy right here that Daniel will be talking about here in a bit. He's a human being. I mean, not right here, this is just cardboard, but you know what I mean. He's a human being. And that's why we're here. We're fighting for human beings who are being caged like animals, you know, and we want to help with that process to help them be released. So there's a gentleman who couldn't make it today. His name is Joshua Vaughn. He works for Penn Live. He's a reporter and a journalist. One thing, he was here at our meeting that we had in Franklin County in October. And one thing that he's doing is this amazing podcast where he interviews lifers, you know. He gives them a prompt for either a poem or an essay, and he allows them to read it, you know, and then he talks a little bit about their story. And this is another way that we're able to humanize these individuals that are incarcerated, because that is what's going to help us when we talk to legislators, when we talk to these representatives and senators. You know, that's why I love doing the work that I do, because I'm not only a Pennsylvania state organizer for Straight Ahead, I'm formerly incarcerated. I went to prison for a murder charge too. And so when they look at me, a lot of times they're like, wait, what? You don't seem like you would do that. But that's what it is. It's about changing that narrative and allowing them to see that the stereotypes are not true. Yes, we do have a lot of individuals in Pennsylvania, which I hate, that 52% of the people in prison in Pennsylvania are black and brown skin. And as Raff was saying, 12% of the population of Pennsylvania, you know. We have to do better, you know. That goes back to the whole race issue, you know. And Brian Stevenson says it's better for you to be guilty and rich than poor and innocent, you know. And he talks about race, you know. And we always know that, you know, if you're black, brown skin, and white and poor, you're going to end up prison with a lot of time, you know. If you are white and you have money, what's going to happen? You're going to get the good deals. A lot of times you're not going to do that time, And so definitely I would recommend listening to Joshua Vaughn's podcast. It's called, I believe it's Lifers. I can send you guys the information. It's put on by Families Against Mandatory Minimums. And so it's really amazing there. And so right now, I'd like to invite Daniel Santiago up here, where he can go ahead and speak about his story, but also his brother.
As he said, my name is Daniel Santiago. I had the misfortune of spending 17 years incarcerated in the Pennsylvania State Prison System. At the age of 16 years old, I was incarcerated along with my brother, who at the time was 18 years old. We had a pretty dysfunctional upbringing, anything from drugs addiction with the parents or, every negatively influential activity that could be thought of. And we, of course, had to raise ourselves in that dysfunction, in that environment. And some can say that is not the sole reason for one to commit crimes or involve themselves in the wrong activities, but it is not true. At the age of 16, I was already robbing stores. I was already selling drugs. My brother, at an early age of 15, began in that lifestyle that we seen in our parental figures, in our street corner drug dealers. We did what we thought at the time would get us to where we needed to be in life. And is that not dysfunctional? Our upbringing and our surroundings was a major factor in our decisions. And I unfortunately spent 17 years incarcerated for crimes that I committed, I was involved in, that resulted in someone's death. This day, I cannot bring them back. This day, my brother cannot bring them back. But would we? Yes, we would. My brother today has 28 years incarcerated in Frackville State Prison. He is a boy who, raised himself, who molded his self to be who he is today. While incarcerated, he's completed pretty much everything that can be offered to him in the state system. He's an artist. He is, he's my brother who influenced me to do better in my life. Despite those negative upbringings and that negative lifestyle early on, he inspired me to, once my release, to maintain my family, my wife, of now 2 years, but we've been together 11. My daughter, Jasmine, he continues to inspire me. And not only because I know that the reality of him spending life in prison from the age of 18 to now, he's already 28 years. So imagine how much longer does he have to do in order to pass away, while in prison. People are on the negative side where one should, do a life sentence. One should be, incarcerated for the rest of their life for a crime they committed. And some parts of me understands that, because some parts of me knows that that victim cannot have a say-so. That victim does not. And from that perspective, I can understand. But I can't understand that after 17 years incarcerated, my drive and my will to actually move forward and build myself up as a man that can be respected, as a man that can stand here today and say that I was wrong, and I wish I could give that back, but I can't. Would I? In a heartbeat. But I can say today that I try in my life to move forward despite my past, despite my downfalls, and I try to move forward and instill values and still better myself today, after 17 years. I hold no aggression towards the past. My best focal point is to better myself in every aspect of man. Back then I visualized man as that street thug. I see my father do things that, it wasn't, it was, in our crimes, my father was right alongside me. In our crimes, my father encouraged me, as he did my brother. In our crimes we committed, I know I can speak for him to say that we seen him as someone that would lead us, someone that would guide us, and we followed those footsteps. My father is currently serving 25 years to 30. And I've reached out. I've reached out to my father, and a lot of me has fought to forgive. A lot of me has let go some things, to look past. Because if I would like my brother for a second chance, then should I not give my father that same opportunity? So I reach out. But my father, he's one for no words. He has no, he has never been one for words. So our conversations are one paragraph. And, it's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I do stand and I do move forward. Despite my mistakes, I've been able to, for 11 years now, 11 years this January, I've been able to maintain my life. I've maintained every aspect. Moving forward with work, I've been able to be called a foreman at my job. Mind you, a 16-year-old, some parts of me still sees that 16-year-old that was living in the street and thinking that was going to be his life forever. I thought that I would die doing that, And it's so unfortunate, that a 16-year-old has that mentality. It's so unfortunate that an 18-year-old, had to look out for his little brother and think that, this is what we'll do. Unfortunately, I lost my mother to HIV. The era of drugs in New York was pretty bad, and unfortunately, I lost my mother to HIV, and from then on, I got cold. I'm pretty sure my brother, seeing her in the casket, felt the same, and yet we moved forward. We moved forward, and today I can say that I continue. I thank everyone that does support the idea and the chance for someone to get that second chance to redeem or even just to move forward in life. I understand that there's no way we can give any family member, anyone else that was involved in the cases, any sort of relief, any sort of support in that manner, and that is speechless. But I can say that it is possible. Today, I still move forward. Today, I still try to not necessarily forget, because you'll never forget that past. You'll never, from looking at that alone, I've seen a cell block You'll never get rid of that. But at the end of the day, what you do today, and as you move forward, and you try to give those individuals who are in the support of a second chance, you give them that truth that it can be possible. You give them that, because it is. You know, there's no part of me that sees a man that commits crimes, that is living in that life. I do not idolize that, not one bit. That working man that actually came home and he got his boots dirty because he was working hard trying to build his family, that's who I idolize today. You know, that is. I guess, yeah, maybe low up. But all I say is that in support of a second chance, at 28 years already, you know, he has such a perspective, you know, that each visit that we do have, because I'm able to go back into the prison that I actually did my 17 years, you know, which shows a lot for me. I could have staff members come to me and say, you know what, you did it, and we knew you would. And we thank you that you tried to uplift him, but yet he's the one uplifting me. Because every day, that is the worst case scenario. I could be living that. I could be there. But yet he encourages me each time. You know, he says he lives through me. And so in a lot of ways, I try to live for him. He was my best man at my wedding. This is why he wears this suit, you know. But again, all I can say is that for everyone that supports, you know, those that have changed their lives and can show and prove that one can change their mind, their perspective in life, from being that lost child to being a grown man who can be a productive citizen. It is completely possible. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. So it's hard to follow Daniel after that, you know, because that just shows you the reality, not only of what Daniel experienced, but what his brother's experiencing on a daily in a daily life, you know. And so right now, I'm going to invite Val up. So Val works with Straight Ahead. She does a lot of our communications. And one aspect of her job is she does a lot of communication with the men and women that are incarcerated. So she's reading these letters from your loved ones and how they're communicating with her and what they're talking about, you know, about the way that their lives have been changed, what they're doing, what their goals, what their aspirations are. Because let me tell you one thing, you know, these men and women, they do have life without parole sentences. Technically, they shouldn't have hope, but they still do have hope. And they dream about that opportunity and chance to get out. And what we want to do with these bills is to give them more hope. I mean, Kurt, Daniel, and myself, we had a lot of hope because we knew that our sentence would end one day. Even if we had to serve our whole sentence, it would end. But we also knew that we had that hope of parole and that we'd be able to potentially garner that parole and get out, you know. And that's what we want to do. We want to give these men and women the opportunity to have a parole hearing. And that's what we're fighting for, you know. And so Val's going to speak a little bit about the work that she's doing.
I just want to express my gratitude for everyone who has spoken. That was extremely powerful. Everything you said, Daniel, and Kurt and Raff, like, I'm still like processing a lot of that. But yeah, as David said, I'm the director of media production for Straight Ahead, and a lot of what I do is corresponding with folks who would be directly impacted by these bills, who are serving life without parole, life, or even virtual life. We sent in a newsletter just to update people, because with the campaign, we want to make sure that we're, taking the feedback of people who are directly impacted, and hearing their thoughts on the bills and including their voices in this campaign. And so we sent it to 6,240 people. And I've just been thinking, listening to people like today about numbers, like how things are just, how we reduce things to numbers, like 5,300 people serving LWOP. That's so many people. 5,300 people serving LWOP with no chance of getting out right now. Plus, like it's 6,240 is the number of people that we sent the newsletter to, because that includes people who are serving what we call virtual life, which is like the one, for an example, someone was sentenced to 824 years. So he would be 900 and something. So that's how many lifetimes? Like, that's life, And yeah, I wanted to read, but I also wanted to say something else I was thinking about. I interviewed someone the other day. His name's Arthur Chetawaya Johnson, and he came home this year after serving 51 years. 44 years in solitary confinement. And that's another situation where it's like the numbers. I can't, my brain can't compute that. Like I'm 29, 51, 44, and he's telling me like about, because it's so long that like the prison system has changed within that time. And when he went in, they had these solitary units called the glass cage, where if you were in solitary and you did something that they didn't like, they would throw you in solitary, basically, in the hole, the prison, in the prison. And it's like, he was just describing it, and I'm like, I can't understand. He's like, it's a concrete box. I mean, that's like every solitary unit, but they have this like double glass door in front of the door, and there's no toilet, it's just a hole. They don't clean it ever, so there's like feces and urine and blood and just like, and they don't feed you. Only when they want to, they'll throw your food on the floor that's covered in feces. Like, and I'm just like, this man, like, how are you sane? Like, how, I don't know, and yeah. And so what I'm thinking about too is that behind those numbers, behind every one of those 5,300 people, 6,240 people, is a story. Everybody, all of us, like, has our own story. And that's what's missed in this, I feel, a lot of times. And like going through, because with the newsletter that we sent in, we requested for people, if interested, to write their own story, to share their testimony with us. And everybody, like, I haven't gone through them all yet because we've gotten a lot of responses, but just from what I've read, like, there's such a wide range. Like, everyone has such completely different experiences. And like David was talking about, and Kurt too, how like the media paints this picture of like what a criminal is supposed to be. And as soon as you get that conviction, then you're thrown into this monolith that like just has all these stereotypes surrounding it, and you come out and you check that box, you got a felony? Oh, well, we're not gonna approve you for this spot, we're not gonna give you this job. Like, no conception that this is a whole human that has their own story. And people in the letters would talk about, like, I didn't even know English. So they're in the courtroom and they sign something, they have no idea what they sign a confession, and then they got life. And now it's too late, in a way, like in this society, within this narrative that we paint of incarcerated human beings, like people don't want to give you that second chance. But he didn't do it. Or like the felony murder cases, like someone was talking about. Or like Chetaweo, because I didn't tell you this part, he didn't do it. He didn't even do the crime. Like, the police coerced a 15-year-old to testify that Chetaweo did it, that Chetaweo killed somebody, and he didn't even kill anybody. So he did 51 years, and he didn't even do it. And so I wanted to read a couple of pieces. There's one letter, and then I'm going to read part of an article from a comrade. So this is from Leonard. I would need more space, as LWOP is a complex and overwhelming sentence. Let's be clear. When you are sentenced to a term of life, you do not think of your life if you are released. You think of how you did this to yourself. And when that is over, you begin to suffer. One is removed from a natural environment and placed in an unnatural environment, and they call it rehabilitation. My ability to provide for my loved ones is taken away, yet the responsibility still is a constant presence. You are not a comfort. In most cases, you are considered a burden. Lawyer fees are astronomical, so the chances for you to have a proper appeal does not exist. If you are not careful, you pick up animal traits. You fail to smile. Joy is not common. Love has no space. Your lens is clouded, and you do not know it, but you are selfish. Whenever you are treated with kindness, you do not know how to respond. Your days are filled with a series of robotic moves. You are unable to dream in color. You think you have no chance. I could write you a million things, but you would not understand them. Human touch, fair dealings, kind words, sexual gratification, all the things you need to remain sane have been removed, and it's named LWOP. Excuse my language, but this shit is tragic. It is only the man in me that keeps me focused and fighting. I am uncomfortable, a state in which I wish to remain in. For if I begin to find comfort, I shall have given my life to prison. Tell the political people and the advocates that it takes a lot of love. And then there's a piece by David Dawood Lee, who is up for commutation right now, and praying that he gets it. And he wrote a piece that I'm going to read parts of, and it's called What is Time to You? Throughout the vast majority of my life, I have listened to people in American society refer to time as money. However, I would venture to say that our time means a lot more than money. Personally, time is life. In my opinion, time is one of the greatest gifts provided to us from our Creator. No matter what your religious beliefs or faith, if you are out of time, you have transitioned into death. Even if you are an atheist, you cannot get around the fact that when you are out of time, you are no longer alive. Therefore, when we waste our time, we in essence are wasting our lives. I ask the readers to think about this for just a moment. Other than our families and friends, what greater gifts as human beings can we have other than our time? Especially if we understand time as being associated with life. How often do we see people taking their time on this planet for granted? How often do we see people playing a bunch of frivolous games every day as if nothing else matters? How often do we witness people grow older physically but fail to mature mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? In these types of people, we can witness how time is wasted to the detriment of the individuals who refuse to see the value of their time and consequently their lives. A question I often ask, what is life without a sense of purpose? I think that life without a sense of purpose is nothing short of wasting our time. Purpose is like a rudder, and when we have a sense of purpose in our lives, we usually will not waste our time because we have a sense of direction. It is unfortunate that we live in a social arrangement where money is considered to be more valuable than life, because by insinuating that time is money, we're also suggesting that money is just as, if not more important than life. When we look at the history of imprisonment in this country, we cannot ignore how the legal system targets the most important aspects of our existence as punishment, and i.e. time. By taking time away from human beings, you are taking something that they can never recover. No matter how hard you work or how hard you try, you cannot retrieve spent or wasted time. Not to mention the lost time with family and friends that we can never retrieve once you are incarcerated. For everyone serving time in this world, especially here in the United States, because this country leads the world in regards to incarceration, we should understand exactly how valuable time is. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I feel like that, to me, represents the urgency of taking steps to dismantle this sentencing scheme that takes away the rest of the time of their life that they have. So yeah, I just want to share that. Thank you.
Those of you that have family members or people that are incarcerated serving these lengthy sentences or life without parole sentences, if they haven't reached out to us sharing their story, have them reach out to us, have them write to us and share their story, because we're doing blogs, we have a blog where we put their stories out there. We're working on different ways to get their stories out there, and these are things that we're going to be sharing with the legislators, because the senators and the representatives don't just need to hear that there's 5,447 people serving life without parole. They need to hear the stories of Kurt, of Daniels, of Dawood, David Lee, and these other individuals, where it humanizes them. We actually are doing some work with Representative Mike Jones from York County, and a couple years ago, he was totally against criminal justice reform. But our Western PA organizer, Terry Minor Spencer, challenged him to go into a prison. He went to SCI Muncie, and he saw these women. He had conversations with these women serving life without parole, these women serving life sentences, individuals who've been there 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And something went off in his head. He saw that these were women. They weren't just a number. As Kurt and Daniel could tell you, they could spout off their number like that. My number was 214579. For 13 and a half years, that is what I was known in Alabama. I served my time in Alabama for a murder charge. I got 25 years. If I was in Pennsylvania, I could have easily gotten first or second degree murder, and I'd still be in prison to this day. I've been out almost 9 years. September of last year, I went down to Alabama, and I was able to get a pardon. So right now, I'm in essence clear, free of that, But the reason I'm here, the reason Kurt's here, the reason Daniel's here is because we're passionate about these men and women that are left behind. You family members, you're here because of your son, your loved ones, your brothers, you're here to fight for them. And that's why we're here. And we don't fight by just speaking, by doing what we're doing right now. We don't fight by just coming together. Our fight is in lobbying. Our fight is in having all of you reach out to your legislator, your senator, your representative, setting up meetings and talking to them, going in, sharing your story. So right now, the next speaker, Colleen, is going to share a little bit about lobbying.
Hi, everyone. My name's Colleen. I'm from Enola right here in Cumberland County, and I was connected with David because of I'm a community organizer, and I do a lot of grassroots work here in Cumberland County. But I want to share a little bit, too, about why I decided to come here today. And I think my story is related to all of you, but it's definitely a different perspective. When I was 12 years old, my Uncle Joe was murdered in his sleep by his wife. And for me, the hardest part of that was that I was very close to her. I hugged her before she was arrested, and I heard her say, "Oh my God, like I can't believe I did this." She was eventually arrested and sentenced to life without parole at Muncie State Prison. I never had the chance to have another conversation with her about why she did that, or what happened, or how she felt about me and how it affected me, because she died in prison of cancer. So it's not, as the family member of a victim, I've never had closure from that experience because of the way the system works. So I think there's a lot of people say, what about the victims? And for me, life without parole was not fair to me as a family member of a victim. So these are the stories that we need to share. Nothing is more impactful than sharing these stories with legislators. This can be a scary topic for politicians, and we need to have these conversations because they don't. We've said, it's not just numbers. These are real people on all sides of these stories, and there's people involved everywhere in each story. So yeah, that's it. And not just politicians. I believe we need to be talking to anyone running for office. We need, and at every level of government, from your MDJs and your district attorneys all the way up to the federal government. So I'm hoping to join you in lobbying for this going forward. I know you said 2 bills that are coming up, and I'm excited to be there to help you with that. Thank you.
Well, so as Colleen said, and I've mentioned before, there are 2 bills right now. So Senate Bill 135 is the lifer bill. And so what that's going to do is anybody who's been convicted of first-degree murder, they would be eligible for parole after 35 years. Anybody who's convicted of second-degree murder would be eligible for parole after 25 years. And Senator Street is the one that has introduced that. It's pretty much a Democratic bill. We do have one Republican, Senator Bartolotta, out of Western PA. She's a co-sponsor of it too. And the other bill is SB 835. SB 835 is the geriatric and medical parole bill. So anybody who has served, these are for individuals 55 and older, anybody who has served 25 years or half their sentence would be eligible for parole. And there's also some medical condition. Thing that they want to call compassionate release, I mean, if you ask me, there's no compassion to it, because there's so many different criteria that you have to fall under. You have to be within 6 months of dying, multiple medical conditions. You have to have a doctor who's actually going to say, yes, Joe is going to die in 6 months. But what happens is if Joe gets out of prison and he doesn't die within that 6 months and he gets better, do you know what happens to him? Back to prison to serve the rest of their sentence, And so that's what we want to do. We want to take that out. So we have a lot of movement in the House. So as I mentioned Mike Jones earlier, Representative Mike Jones, he's actually been working with us for the past 5-6 months about sponsoring a bill in the House. And he's all for allowing anybody to fall under the geriatric medical parole. So he wants to help with the geriatric medical parole. He's for the same numbers that is in the Senate right now. There's another representative, Representative Joshua Kale. So he's out of Western PA in the county right next to Pittsburgh. We actually met with him earlier this week. He's put a memo out as far as a geriatric medical parole bill. Families Against Mandatory Minimums have been working with him as far as the language around this bill. If you guys are interested, I can send you the language around what he's put out there as far as a memo. And he's for these reform, And one thing he was telling us is that right now, there's a lot of shift, a lot of the individuals that are Republicans in the House, they are newer. A lot of the long-term Republicans in the House are retiring, So that's going to be good as far as we move forward. And they're they're thinking a lot more about change. They're thinking a lot more about reform. They're thinking a lot more about the condition that our prisons are in, you know. And in thinking about that, you know, we think that it's a monetary thing. You know, there's a lot of money that's being spent on these individuals, you know. Pennsylvania, we have about 39,000 people incarcerated. There's over 10,000 individuals that are 55 and older. So about 25% of our population. Now, the thing to think about with this population is that we're not locking up individuals that are out here committing crimes in walkers and wheelchairs. I mean, has anybody heard the news and been like saying there's a crime wave of people with walkers and wheelchairs? I mean, I haven't seen that lately. So it goes back to kind of what Kurt touched on as far as those numbers. 73% of our people serving life without parole right now committed their offense before they were 25. 50% before they were 21. And the average age of incarceration for somebody with a life without parole is 19.8 years. Their current average age is 48.8 years old. So that's almost 30 years that they've served. And that's why we have such a large population of elders in our prisons, you know. And so that's why we're here fighting. That's why we're doing these bills, to help these men and women come home. They're not the people they were when they were arrested. I mean, my offense happened over 23 years ago. I'm not the same person. Daniel's offense happened 28 years ago. Kurt's happened 26 years ago. We are not the same people. I mean, it's something that I was thinking about when Val was talking about like the way we view people in crime and stigma and stereotypes is, I had the opportunity to speak in a federal prison in November. I walk in there, I have a maroon suit on, Chelsea boots, I have my earrings in. I walk in there, I'm like, hey, how y'all doing? They're like, hey. I was like, I'm formerly incarcerated. They're like, okay. I'm like, what do you think I went to prison for? The whole room said fraud. There was one black guy up front, he's like, man, you think you're a pimp. I was like, no. I was like, I don't have the platform boots, you know. But then I told them murder, and they're all like, huh? But that's the thing, you know, the stereotype is for a white person that we committed fraud. We committed some white-collar crime, you know. And when you think about somebody that's black and brown skin, it's automatically drugs or murder. And so that's why we're here to change that narrative, you know, and to make this about human beings, about individuals, you know. And so we thank you all for coming out here. What I wanted to do too is I wanted to allow Rabbi Marley to speak a little bit because they're having an event on February 6th here in the area. It's going to be virtual, but she will tell you a little bit more about it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rabbi Marley Weiner. I am the Jewish chaplain at Dickinson College, and I'm going to speak very, very briefly as somebody who primarily came to learn and as an expert in no way, shape, or form on this issue. I am a member of the Office of Equity and Inclusivity directors at Dickinson College, so it's myself, the Multiracial Center, the LGBTQ Center, the Women and Gender Center, all sort of coalescing together, and our theme for programming this year is carceral justice. And many, many of my colleagues' sort of presentations and programming this year will be around this theme. And from myself, as a chaplain and as somebody who believes strongly in giving people the opportunity to tell their own stories and to give my students the opportunity to hear a variety of different stories. One story that many of my students, many of whom are, not all, but many of whom are white, middle or upper middle class Jewish people, who tend to think of incarceration as an issue that should matter to Jewish people just as the result of like being good people, but not as an issue that touches our community directly, which is not true. So I'm inviting a number of folks from CADB, the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, of which this group intersects, as well as some Jewish chaplains and rabbis who do prison support for incarcerated Jewish folks, to come and speak about faith-based organizing and to tell the stories of incarcerated people, because it's something that many of my students have no awareness of whatsoever. These sorts of programs are often open to the public. You can find information about all of the office's programming on the Dickinson website. Our program will be February 6th, which is a Sunday, 4 p.m. It will be virtual, and like I said, it will be a panel of all different sorts of people, an opportunity to tell their stories and an opportunity to ask and answer questions. So if you are interested in coming and, being on the internet with us and, helping our students who, are really invested in social justice stuff and really do care about becoming responsible leadership for the future, coming and meeting them and talking to them, please come talk to me. I've been, just on a personal note, I'm so grateful to have found out about this event. I'm so grateful for being able to learn and hear the stories of the folks in this room. Thank you guys for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing this with us. Like I said, I'm a student. I'm new to this side of this particular issue, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to learn. So thank you.
Well, I definitely want to thank everybody for coming out. One thing we're ramping up this year is creating individual constituents and helping them lobby themselves. Not lobbying with straight ahead, but the individuals lobbying themselves. Because a lot of these senators and legislators have already heard from us. But what's important is when they hear from you, when they hear your story, when they hear that you are the people that are voting for them. And if they want to stay in office, what do they have to do? Get your vote. So that's the importance each one of you has. You have the ability to vote and to keep these individuals in office. And so as we're moving forward in 2022, we're definitely going to keep you all in touch as far as what we're doing, the bills, where they're progressing, what legislators, senators, representatives are working on bills, and that's the way we're going to help you, and you can let your loved ones know about it. Because one thing we have done at Straight Ahead is we've already had, I think, about 7 or 8 visits at universities, because we want to educate students about what's happening too. Because students, they're more aware. Kurt was talking about with me earlier about the awareness that these young people have about these issues. A lot of times you get people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they're not as aware. But you get these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, they're aware. Some of it is because they're watching all the Orange is the New Black or Wentworth or other shows on Netflix, and that's one thing I get asked a lot, is prison really like Orange is the New Black, But, that's the way that we have those conversations, because they have the interest, their awareness is peaked, and they want to learn more, So if you have family members that are young, talk to them about these issues, because what are they going to do? They're going to be the next prosecutors. They're going to be the next law enforcement. They're going to be the next correction officers. They're going to be the next president, right? So we have to educate them, and that's why we love going to universities and to share about these issues and just to see the passion that they have. Definitely thank you all for coming out, and we look forward to being in touch with y'all.